Sleeping Dogs is a game that I reference quite a lot on this channel, and there is a very good reason for that. This game was released originally back in 2012, but it's a game that's just got better and better as the time goes on. It has a rich story, it has action-packed gameplay, and it's in a very unique setting for a video game. This open world classic still offers an experience worth diving into today, so let's break down 8 reasons why Sleeping Dogs remains a must-play heading into 2025. Number 1. Immersive Hong Kong setting. As I mentioned in the introduction, it has a very unique setting, which is Hong Kong. There aren't many video games based in Hong Kong, especially those that are open world. This isn't your standard open world city, it's alive with culture, from crowded street markets to neon lit nightlife, and speaking of nightlife, it is quite literally night and day difference when driving around the city during the daylight compared to that of the pitch black night. The game immerses you in a world that feels authentic. The detailed environment and atmospheric touches make it feel like you're stepping into a living, breathing city. Even in 2024, going into 2025, this level of detail still holds up, and in fact it lacks in other video games released much later than Sleeping Dogs, which, may I remind you, is 12 years old at this point. Number 2, the gripping story. Now, there are many elements that make up a gripping story. It's not just that it's well written. You obviously have to factor in actors, voice actors, etc. And Sleeping Dogs nails every single one of these. At its core, Sleeping Dogs is a story-driven game. You play as Wei Shen, an undercover cop tasked with infiltrating the dangerous Sun On Yi triad. The story balances personal conflict, Wei's struggle to remain loyal to the police, while forming bonds within the triad. It's a story that will have you torn between factions and indeed the police. Of course, your original assignment is to go undercover, but as the story progresses, you start to build relationships with certain characters. And I'm not actually talking about your character, I mean you, the player. The voice acting is so good. It is up there with some of, if not the best video games ever created.
So, was this like a date?
Sounds good to me.
It's very compelling and it's very convincing. Number 3, the combat. Now, most open world third-person games will generally feel very similar. Run and gun, you have a machine gun, you can whip out your rocket launcher, and of course I am referencing GTA for the most part here, which this game does try and compete with. But there's something a little bit different about Sleeping Dogs, and that comes down to the martial arts combat. It's fluid, it's brutal, and above all else, it is absolutely satisfying. Many people will compare it to the Batman style combat, and whereas I can definitely see where people are getting that from, there is another layer to it as well, the environment. Now, I've already spoken about the environment being immersive and vibrant, but when it comes to combat, you can actually use the environment to your advantage here. Certain parts of the environment will start to flash red when you're near them. That means you can utilize it in like a finisher style move where you can ram an enemy down a pipe or through a fish tank, for example. There are plenty of ways you can utilize the environment to perform a kill. It is completely different to anything that you've ever played, and of course the martial arts combat is based on actual UFC fighter. He helped them through the whole process, so it does feel authentic. And as you progress through the story, you of course learn more moves and easier and better ways to take down your opponents, and it's ever evolving. Just a quick second to thank the channel members. Thank you very much for supporting the channel and allowing me to continue doing what I'm doing. If you'd like to get involved, the link is in the description. Get early access to videos as well as some exclusive videos as well. And with that being said, let's get back to the video. Now, this can be hit and miss with many people, but number 4 is the driving mechanics. So for me personally, I do like realistic feeling driving. I think GTA has a very good driving mechanic. Sleeping Dogs, many would argue, is nowhere near as good. But the point here is that it's not realistic in the slightest. In fact, it's very arcadey. It's not a million miles away from a game that I actually slagged off recently, Wheelman. The driving mechanics within Wheelman do feel very arcadey, and this is a game that was released back in 2008. And in that game, You can jump from vehicle to vehicle as many times as you like, seamlessly. And that is something that Sleeping Dogs obviously saw and decided they wanted for themselves. And it is done very well. It's something that is done well in Wheelman, to be fair, becomes a bit of a gimmick toward the back end of the game. But in Sleeping Dogs, for some reason, it doesn't really get boring to do it. You could argue I have a vendetta against Vin Diesel, but I don't. It's just that Sleeping Dogs managed to pull this off better than Wheelman does. The cars do feel very arcadey when you're racing through the Hong Kong streets, but for some reason it just works, and above all else, that word again, it's satisfying. Number 6, engaging side activities. This game has an awful lot of side quests, which is something only certain video games nail. Red Dead Redemption being one of them. The side quests in that game will keep you occupied and entertained for hours, even longer than the main story will. In fact, you can spend over 100 hours in a game like Red Dead Redemption without touching any of the main story, but still completing mission after mission. That's just how vibrant the world is and how many side quests there are. Well, guess what? Sleeping Dogs is almost exactly the same. You could spend hours upon hours completing side quests, getting robbed on the street for helping an innocent pedestrian, having to chase them down and retrieve your belongings. The game is packed with engaging side activities. There are martial arts tournaments. You can sing karaoke, believe it or not. You can take on street races, very much like Grand Theft Auto in that sense. It just adds variety and gives you more reasons to explore the city. Even in 2024, these side missions feel rewarding and add to the game's charm, which is something that very much lacks in a lot of games coming out these days. In fact, nearly every single one of them falls short in this department. So my next point might be a cop-out for many, and you maybe should have named this 7 reasons why you should play Sleeping Dogs, but I am going with the density of the world. And yes, you could maybe tie that into just Hong Kong in general, but there's so much more that goes into this. So first off, the map itself doesn't actually look that big. When you press pause and you have a look at it, you think, well, it's not that big. But you can explore nearly every inch of this city. Every single back alley, all the little nooks and crannies within a city are explorable, and they are a warren, a maze that takes you ages to get round, and there's always something going on down nearly every single one. The NPCs are some of the best NPCs you will ever find in a video game. They all feel unique. And yes, of course, they do have their catchphrases which do repeat now and again, but to be fair to this game, every NPC feels unique from the last time you met one. It becomes engaging talking to them, and of course a lot of them will have side quests for you to complete. Should you choose to do so, of course, you don't actually need to, you can just kill them and move on, or ignore them completely and move on. But when walking through a market, it is so densely populated, it feels real. It feels like you are having to swim through this sea of people in a market, which is how I assume Hong Kong actually is. The audio and the soundtrack of this game is very, very good. I would say that it's up there with one of the best, and I am going to touch upon the voice acting once more because that does kind of fall under audio, but it's just top notch. The acting is quite literally some of the best you will see in a video game. It is Hollywood level acting, and a lot of people will argue that Hollywood level acting is terrible, but you get my point here. It has an incredible cast. Emma Stone makes an appearance here as well. The soundtrack deserves special mention as well. It's filled with Chinese pop, hip hop and traditional music. Whether you're cruising through the streets or fighting enemies, the music enhances the atmosphere in a ways few games manage.
You can't take this stuff personally, Wei. It was business. You know what I'm saying?
And I'm aware that I've mentioned that a few times already, that there are quite a few games, in fact nearly every game comes out these days, that just doesn't match up to the level of detail within Sleeping Dogs. But I mention it because it's true, and I keep referencing it because it's true. You'd think that as time progresses we would get better at developing games, making them feel lived in and densely populated, but for some reason developers shy away from trying to make a world feel lived in, and they try and make it look this most beautiful thing they can, which is not necessarily a bad thing. We all love good graphics, but it's at the detriment of the world feeling lived in. And that brings me to my final point, which is the Definitive Edition enhancements. Originally, this game had 3 main DLCs, and it did have several updates to improve the overall experience of the game. And back in 2014, the Definitive Edition was born, and that is by far the very best way to play this game. Of course, you can go back and play the original on the Xbox 360 or the PS3, but why would you want to do that when you can play the most updated version, whether that be PS4, Xbox One, or of course, PC, which is how many people would choose to play this game, and I would probably recommend that if you're able to. The devs of this game deserve so much praise. Even today, heading into 2025, I would say that Sleeping Dogs is still somewhat of a hidden gem. There is a small corner of the internet that keeps singing its praises, and I am in that crowd, but there are a large number of people who have still yet to experience the beauty and the masterpiece that is Sleeping Dogs, even 12, nearly 13 years later. Let me know if you've played Sleeping Dogs in the comments. If you'd like to check out another video from me, you can click the screen. And until the next time, goodbye.